Welcome to Jackson's Warfield. Today, we're painting the HeroScape promo figure, Thyraxis Dragoon. Why? Well, apparently this figure can only be purchased unpainted. What I'm doing here is I am priming the miniature with what I like to call a clear primer. This is Munitorum Varnish, which is a Citadel varnish that can be used as a clear primer. The reason why I'm doing this is I'm not certain that the surface of the miniature is going to be a great surface for paint to stick to. So I'm doing this just to be safe. Because it's clear, it's a little bit tough to tell when you've painted it sufficiently, but a couple sweeping coats here, matching what I would typically do for any type of primer, and we're good to start painting. Now you see here, I'm comparing the Thyraxis Dragoon to Queen Maladrix the Conqueror. They have similar paint schemes, and this is a better reference than the army card for Thyraxis Dragoon. Get the right shade of blue, the right shade of green, and the right shade of brown. This is gonna be a quick and dirty paint scheme. We're going to do a 1-layer base coat followed by a wash step. So it's really only a 2-step process. For different miniatures projects, I would typically go longer. So all we're trying to do is match the typical HeroScape paint scheme, and just make it maybe a little bit nicer. We're starting with base coating. Now, apologies for some of the weird lighting here. So I'm using a head flashlight to do this. I feel like I'm cursed with lighting in my current household. So I'll leave that as a tip. While it may distort the colors on the video a little bit, I do recommend using a head flashlight while you're painting. You'll be able to see things much better. Plus, a lot of the head magnifiers can come with that. So if you can adjust to using head magnifiers, that will make your painting more effective. I didn't actually use the magnifiers at all while painting Thyraxis Dragoon, but I definitely used the flashlight. It was the best source of lighting. It's the type of lighting that I'm used to. Now, with this base coating, I'm using Steel Legion Drab, which is a light brown. Because the model is white, we're gonna be able to get away with just one coat here. And all you're really looking to do is avoid any spots where it looks like the paint is thin. You don't want to look like it was just painted. But at the same time, you don't need a homogeneous color. I actually like to have slight saturation changes on my miniature on the base coat because it will actually add interest to the model, make it look a little bit more realistic, especially once you put any type of wash over top. One of the biggest time sinks in miniature painting is getting multiple coats onto different layers, so hopefully people will appreciate that this particular scheme has only one layer for the base coats. The biggest challenge with Thyraxis Dragoon is the fact that it cannot be disassembled, and there's a lot of underbody that we have to get to here. I'm not using my best brush to get this brown, but at the same time, I need a brush that I can control enough to keep it off of areas I don't want painted brown. It's not the biggest deal if you make some small mistakes. I just don't want brown all over areas of the model that are going to become blue or green, because that means I will have to come in with more layers when I have those colors to make sure that the brown isn't overly impacting how those layers look. I went back and forth between a few different brushes here. The main brush that I used was a Princeton #2. This brush is a larger brush that comes to a pretty good point, so it's good for getting into small nooks and crannies. The other brushes I used are cheap, either old brushes or actually I think I even used Mondo Llama brushes. It really doesn't matter for the low quality brushes. I didn't use a really large brush because I didn't want to make too many mistakes, but I was able to go quickly because we're talking about old brushes here. One thing you can do to maintain your brush life is to avoid having the paint make it all the way up into the ferrule on the paintbrush, but if you're using old cheap brushes, they're beyond savings, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. HeroScape miniatures aren't the highest quality sculpts. They're fine, but sometimes you will need to add color to be able to actually see all the details on the miniatures. For example, one detail that I had trouble with on the Thyraxis Dragoon was the shoulders for each of the legs. I wasn't sure where the blue armor ended and the brown leg began. But as I started to add color to it, it started to make sense, and especially at those edges between the colors, was able to make adjustments later. I'm not too worried about the edges though, because we're gonna come in with a wash step later. A lot of those errors are gonna become hidden and just part of shadows. Of note, I thought Steel Legion Drab was a good brown for the miniatures, and if you actually look at Queen Maladrix, the base for HeroScape miniatures for the new Age of Annihilation miniatures is actually a different shade of brown. It's very close. It's actually kind of a, I don't know how to describe that. Is that a Nutella brown, I guess? I'm gonna apply a wash later to the brown that's on the Thyraxis Dragoon, but I'm not gonna apply a wash to the base. That'll provide the necessary contrast between the miniature and the base itself. Moving on now to the blue armor, which I'm using Sotek Green. All of the colors that I'm using today, except for the white, are Citadel paints. They're very easy paints to find at local game stores because they tend to sell those paints wherever they sell Warhammer miniatures. Zotek green is, I would call it blue, maybe British people would call it green, but it's a tealish blue that I think matches the armor pretty well. With the armor, there are also a lot of spots that I had trouble reaching. My rule of thumb, though, with reaching models, because I don't do a lot of sub-assembly painting. I will very often fully assemble a miniature and then try to paint it, saving myself time in the assembly piece by inflicting more challenge on myself in reaching difficult-to-reach areas of the miniatures. My rule here is if I can see it, as in if I can see any white spots on the miniature, I can paint it. The challenge is sometimes you can't see it and paint it at the same time. So if you're looking at a miniature and you see from one angle you see some white, and then you try to reach it with your brush, you might not be able to reach it unless you put your brush where your eye was coming from, which sometimes means you have to position your brush and then try to look at it from another angle. It's a technique that takes a little bit of practice, but for a miniature like this where you can't disassemble it, it's good to know that, again, if you can see it, you can reach it. It just might take some extra care, and you might have to do some extra touch-ups later if you rub the wrong color against the wrong piece of the model. For the light green portion here, this is the armor / almost shoulder pads on the big guy here. I'll call him the rhinoceros beetle. I don't know if the Thyraxis Dragoon is the guy riding the beetle or the little bug guy riding the, like if it's the rider or the creature. I'm assuming it's the rider, because in HeroScape it usually is the rider. I digress. Moot green is a great color for this map. This step also went by a lot more quickly because there isn't as much green and the green is not hidden underneath the miniature. I used the same moot green for the body of the little bug guy on top. Admittedly, the little bug guy was much harder to paint though because the details are getting smaller. I don't know why his pants are just like taped up, like wrap, like medical wrap, like he's been injured. Maybe that's why he has to ride the guy. I don't know. For the little bug guy's armor, I'm using Troll Slayer Orange. If I weren't doing a simple strategy and I weren't trying to match the HeroScape paint job, I might have chosen a different color because Moot Green and Troll Slayer Orange are both very bright. And to make it look realistic, you would need to add a lot of shading and add a lot more contrast. But since we've set the bar a little bit lower, I'm content with just trying to match this orange. And as I'm adding the orange here, more of the challenges of this little guy are coming out. First of all, you can't take him off the model. So getting around his legs and getting under him is very challenging. A lot of the spots where he touches his saddle, I'm gonna have to just fill in with a lot of dark brown shade and it'll look fine. Straps are also already tough to paint. If you look at the little bug guy, you'll see he has straps under his arms, almost like he's wearing hockey pads. These are tough enough to paint with highly detailed miniatures. With the HeroScape miniatures, sometimes you don't even have the ridges for where the straps are, so you kind of have to guess. When we come with the wash, it'll take care of some of the mistakes here. Again, we're not going for Mona Lisa here, but this is one of the more time-consuming areas of the paint job. If the base weren't attached, I might have tried doing a darker primer coming from the underside of the miniature to create a zenithal primer effect. Maybe for future miniatures, I'll do a brighter white primer from above that might end up being brighter than the unpainted miniature, especially because their unpainted miniatures do have a bit of a shade to it. When I say shade and wash, I'm using them interchangeably. The HeroScape miniatures, even when they're unpainted, come with a little bit of a wash.
Hey Google, what time is it?
12:30 a.m.
For the silver, I'm using Lead Belcher, which is a little bit of a dark silver that is a little bit shiny, naturally shiny, like metal. I'm not going to do it too complex with the different swords, but I'm making sure to hit the swords. And I'm also painting the spikes on the leg armor silver. It's funny, the box art for Thyraxis Dragoon showed that these spikes were silver, but if you look at Queen Maledrix the Conqueror, those spikes were actually the same color as the bug's legs. It looked as if the spikes were sticking through. I just went with the silver here because I thought it added more to the miniature than making the brownish stick through. Admittedly, that doesn't match perfectly anymore, but I mean, he's wearing armor. There's no reason why his armor could just happen to have spikes. Now it's time for the shading. So we're using Agrax Earthshade on the brown sections of the miniature. This is gonna make the miniature immediately look a lot better. And I'm covering pretty much the entire miniature with this, and I'm making sure to get enough shade, enough wash in at the edges of the brown so that you get that nice divide between the brown sections of the miniature and the blue. People will say that washes and shades are like skill in a bottle, and this is why. It brings out all the details on the miniature and makes it look like a much more complicated paint job than it actually is. One of the secrets of miniature painting is that contrast is everything. The difference between a miniature looking like a toy versus looking like a piece of art will often come down to how strong the contrast is between the darks on the miniature and the lights. It can be tough to train your eye to see this contrast because we'll see surfaces and say it's blue, but realizing that things in real life are shaded everywhere. You have making something look metallic is really just the exercise in having the colors go from very bright to very dark. The HeroScape standard paint jobs do still look like toys, and I'm totally fine with that, but this shade still makes it look nicer, and it's actually very easy to do. To shade the Sotek green, I'm using Drakenhof Nightshade, which is actually a blue shade. If you're using only brown and black washes, blue is one of those colors you would normally come in with a black wash. Blue, purple, pink, and silver, maybe I'll shade with black. All the other colors I would generally shade with brown if I'm using only black and brown washes. But I think a dark blue wash here is going to make the miniature look a lot nicer, because the HeroScape paint jobs, they generally look just like a little just dirty, and not dirty in a realistic way. The same color washes I think is just going to bring out the miniature's details better, and it's going to make it look like you actually have a color gradient and not just a bunch of brown stuff sitting on top of the miniature. Similar idea here with the green. I'm using Croak Green to shade my Moot Green. This Croak Green has a little bit of a bluish to it, but definitely looks, in my opinion, better than if we just went with the brown wash like you had on Queen Maladrix the Conqueror. I was experimenting a little bit with the little bug guy. First I went with Cassandora Yellow shade, which yellow, the idea is it's kind of a bridge between the orange and green, but it wasn't dark enough and didn't really provide much of a shadow effect here. So I came back in and I applied different shade colors. First I tried Seraphim Sepia, which is a warm brown wash. That really wasn't dark enough. So then I also came in with Agrex Earthshade at the end and really got some shading, especially on the spots where you're getting underneath the little bug guy. But this is another step. As I started to add the detail, I came back in with the green or the orange or the silver later to clean up some details that were, I realize now, painted the wrong color. Now that I'm done with the shading, and again, I've been trying to keep the shading off of the base because I want the base to be more of a HeroScape typical solid color. I came in and painted the teeth, and I'm painting the teeth with white. I'm using Pro Acryl Titanium White. I did this to brighten the teeth up because they really just looked like dirty plastic. And then I shaded the teeth back with Seraphim Sepia, which gives a little bit of an interesting color to the shade instead of just a dark brown. I went with that just as a stylistic choice. I thought it looked kind of cool. I would have added saliva to the teeth if I were making a, say, Warhammer style miniature, or making a miniature that wasn't going to go and be stored loosely in a toolbox, which is kind of how I store my HeroScape miniatures. Because the saliva effect, you can do that, and maybe I'll do that in a future video, but it will break off if your miniature is loose. So I thought that would be overdoing it a little bit. The last details I took care of were the eyes. I'm normally not someone who paints the eyes on miniatures, but that applies for when the eyes are like human eyes and they're very small. Both the big beetle guy and the little rider guy have large eyes. For each set of eyes, I first painted with white to make sure that the eye color was brighter, because putting green on top of brown, for example, is going to make it look like a very dark green. So I did a layer of white, and then I just painted it the color I wanted. For the big beetle guy, I added green. I left a little bit of white on the edges to make the eyes a little bit more striking for the beetle. And then for the bug guy, his eyes are more of the blue, so I did, in this case I went the other order. I went with a little bit of Drakenhof Nightshade, then a little bit of Sotek Green. I put little white dots to be some kind of reflection there. You know, by this point, it was like well after 1 a.m., so I kind of wrapped it up. But here's our Thyraxis Dragoon. So if you are trying to get your miniature painted, feel free to use the colors that I've used in this video. I got this one done in under 2 hours, which if they offered a painted version, I probably would have bought the painted version, but this is the next best thing, and also it's fun to paint miniatures like this. So if you enjoyed this video, let me know. Let me know if you want to do more painting videos on the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.